Hello, friends. I'm JVL from the Bulwark, joined with my colleague Bill Crystal, and we're doing a quick Bulwark emergency live stream because right around dinner time this evening, the Supreme Court announced, yeah, they'll hear the case. They granted cert for the Trump appeal of the unanimous decision out of the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals. They're gonna hear the whole case, the full Megillah. They're not going to do it till late April 22nd. And anyway, the whole world sort of blew up after this happened. Bill, I have a bunch of thoughts on my own, but I'm interested to hear yours first.
Okay, but then I want to hear yours since you predicted this, and I'd like to know how you, apart from your general brilliance and perspicacity, how you particularly got this one right. My thoughts are no. It's really bad, and that is Jack Smith, the special counsel, asked the Supreme Court to take this up right away, skip the Court of Appeals. That happens in some of these very important cases. Supreme Court said, just before Christmas, no, we have to go through the Court of Appeals. Okay, the Court of Appeals went pretty fast. Came up with a very comprehensive 57-page opinion more than a couple of weeks ago, about 3 weeks ago. Trump appealed that. And everyone, I think people who assumed the court might be acting in kind of good faith, if I can put it, maybe that's a slight exaggeration, but maybe it's not, So, okay, there's no reason. It's not a close call legally. Just say no. The D.C. Circuit has decided this. There's no reason to grant cert. And then there would have been a delay of about 3 months from when the trial would originally have begun, but the clock would start ticking again. The case would go back to the district judge, Judge Chutkan, and it would go ahead. Instead, the Supreme Court waited 2.5 weeks to grant cert.
Waited 2.5 weeks. This is actually key to understanding.
It is. Cert is a 4 judges vote for cert. That's it. There's no one else can overrule that. You don't really get to persuade the judges. It's just a very standard thing that's totally.
And because of the delay, I should say, people had talked themselves, really smart lawyer types, had talked themselves into believing this means they're going to deny cert because what they're doing is they're giving time for the dissents to file their grievances on this.
So that was another 2.5 weeks of totally unnecessary delay. And I guess the one point I'd make, and I do want to get to your explanation, is sometimes, the rule of law produces unsatisfactory results. We're all aware of this in a million different cases, but you say that's the price we pay for having the rule of law, all these procedures, long established, criminal cases, trials, guilty people get off, et cetera, et cetera. Things take time. These were all discretionary choices. There was no reason the Supreme Court couldn't have taken the case right away. There was no reason the Supreme Court couldn't have denied cert. There was no reason if they were going to give cert, they could have done so 2 weeks ago and said, you know what, these were argued very thoroughly before the D.C. Circuit, and we have a 57-page opinion. We'll have oral arguments in 2 weeks. We'll make the decision in 2 weeks, and we'll get going in a little later, but still in a reasonable time frame. And instead, the Supreme Court very consciously and as a matter of choice, as a matter of discretion, chose this kind of delay. And then the final, thing is but it's not an expedited timeline, JVL. It's April 20, the week of April 22nd. That's really charging ahead. I mean, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
This thing was thoroughly argued, very comprehensive opinion, and 2 months is the expedited timeline, which pretty much guarantees that it doesn't get resolved before the election.
Right. So I think what this means, before we get into the whys and wheretofores, we should just talk practically about what happens next. This means we probably don't get a decision from the high court until summer.
Yeah, maybe some people are saying June 1st. It could be at the end of term, which would be July 1st. But let's say June 1st. Yeah,
maybe. But which then pushes so then the clock starts running. Assuming that they uphold the lower court,
right?
Which I think almost everybody assumes they will, and that they will probably 7-2. I think most people think that's where.
But again, just one caveat. I think that's probably true, though. Most people thought they might deny cert, but they could also remand certain things for more arguments. There are a lot of in-between ways they could even further delay. But even if they uphold the lower court, June 1st, upheld 7-2, goes back to Judge Chutkan, clock starts ticking again. Earliest that case then goes June, July, August is Labor Day. Earliest, the actual. Is the district court going to begin a case on Labor Day when voters are about to vote in 2 weeks? And no. And I think Labor Day is even optimistic there. It would probably be more like, mid-September or the end of September.
So what today's decision practically means is that the January 6th case that Jack Smith was bringing in D.C. is off the table now for the election. It's gone.
Most likely. Some of these lawyers who are so into the legal, who are such
I know.
faith in the legal system. Look, Bill, they don't look at the election clock. This case could begin on September 21st. They don't care that people are.
Yeah, this is the
I
case
don't
where
think.
these people know too much
Yeah.
about the law, and so they lose the forest with the trees and everything. We believe that the classified documents case, which again is the easiest one, classified documents could have been done in like 4 weeks. Judge Eileen Cannon has made it pretty clear she's not going to let this case proceed before the election, which is an astonishing thing.
Right.
I mean, literally, it just astonishes me that she wouldn't have recused herself since she's trying the guy who appointed her. Like, in any other judicial setting, I just can't believe, right? If we were dealing with at the state level, in a governor had appointed a judge in the state, then the governor was on trial for corruption. If the judge that governor had appointed drew the case, they would recuse themselves. It is gobsmacking to me that she didn't. But here we go. So that's not going to go forward. The RICO case in Georgia nobody ever thought that this would move forward before the election because it's just too big and sprawling, which leaves Alvin Bragg. And so we've got the weakest of the cases, and I say weak because the facts aren't weak. The facts are open and shut, really. But what is tough about it is that it is a novel reading of the law. And so nobody has to convince anybody that Trump is guilty or that he didn't do, that he did what the state says he did, because he just did. This is, everybody knows it, and they have this dead to rights. But the question is, can they make this statute apply in this particular case?
And that's a case that has to do with things he did in 2016.
Correct.
So 8 years old. Stormy Daniels related, complicated payment schemes he had. And assuming they don't succeed, well, even if he does, in bumping the misdemeanor up to a felony, which was a somewhat novel, I believe, interpretation of what he could do, he could be found guilty and be fined or something,
right,
or have probation. So it would be.
So we're going to head to the election with, at best, the weakest case having proceeded against Trump, and entirely possible that he beats that one. Entirely possible. And so then what? We head into September, October with Trump claiming total exoneration. The other cases all sort of just kicked down the road. And I have to say, I think if Donald Trump is acquitted or gets a hung jury in the only case that actually makes it to court against him, I think he wins. I think he wins the election. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I have to think. I look at this and I think, man, this is not good. So, am I wrong about that? Do you think I'm over determining this?
Maybe slightly, but no, you're basically right. Incidentally, the Bragg case, he could be convicted on some counts, as I said, the misdemeanor counts, not on others. He'd appeal right away. That thing is not going to be resolved in people's minds. And actually, to be fair, it's not going to really be resolved. Because those are slightly complicated, readings of statutes. It would be fair for the appellate court to take a real look at it and so forth. So that's not going to happen before November. So I think.
Well, only if he's found guilty, right? I mean, if he's
if he's innocent, if it's a hung jury, they could retry it. That would be insane. So
it's one of these heads he wins, tails they lose, right?
Yes, this is a very good. But again, I come back to there were other ways. The Supreme Court could have, in good faith, thought, you know what, you can't just leave this as an appellate court decision. It's President of the United States, it's Trump, it's immunity. It's very important. People think this is the kind of thing the Supreme Court could resolve. They could have taken the case in December. It could be resolved literally now. They could have had perfectly good briefings, oral arguments, just as the D.C. Circuit did. Think about it. That they would have done the same thing, and they would have had their 57-page opinion now. And then it would go back to Judge Chutkan, and it would have 3 months. It would still be a little dicey doing it in the summer, but it would be at least. But that's what's so appalling to me, that at least 4 Supreme Court justices were sort of very consciously, in my mind, they wanted to avoid. They did not want to decide this case this year.
I bet it was more than 4.
Could well be.
Which I'll get to that in a minute.
Yeah.
I just want to say something. So our colleague Mark Caputo had a piece this week about Trump's money troubles. And in it, one of Mark's sources said the following. He being Trump, thinks he's going to win. And he believes that if he wins, all this other stuff gets taken care of. This guy was talking about Trump's money trouble, right? Where's he going to get the $500 million for this? How is he going to... And but he might as well have been talking about the legal stuff too, because that's what this all is. This is, Trump is... If Trump becomes president of the United States, all this stuff goes away, right? And we wind up in an immediate constitutional crisis as the new attorney general fires Jack Smith, right? And so you got the guy which again makes it entirely possible that this case never winds up getting adjudicated, right? I mean, this is entirely possible that this thing gets pulled before it even hits trial. All right, can I tell you how I knew this was going to happen?
Yes, please.
So I think the mistake a lot of the people who know more about the law than I do, which is everybody, make, is that they view the Supreme Court as a judicial institution, and it's not. It's a political institution. The law is what happens at every level below the Supreme Court. Once you hit the Supreme Court, the only consideration is political. And it was pretty clear to me that the Roberts Court absolutely does not want to be perceived as touching or influencing anything having to do with this presidential election. And so if you work from the assumption that they did not want to have their fingerprints on anything, and that their overriding incentive was to preserve their own sense of legitimacy, then they had to kick this can down the line. And for them, the optimal outcome would be a decision which upholds the lower court and very strongly states that there is no blanket presidential immunity, but that it comes after any election, and that it makes sure that the legal cases or the criminal cases against Trump are pushed as far out to the horizon as possible. And it was just obvious to me from the get-go. And you've seen this, look at the 14th Amendment case, right? Where they found in Trump's favor. It has nothing to do with the merits. It's just a political decision, right? The court has decided.
They haven't found yet, I guess, but they
right.
Will.
Yeah,
and
I guess that's right.
This one too will be both decisions will be before the election. They'll be presumably be this term. But you're right; they'll end up with two overwhelming decisions. Presumably, no absolute immunity, no 14th Amendment bar. We played it straight, fair. The voters can decide. Kind of wash their hands of it, right? I mean, that's what you think.
Yeah, and this is, once you understand the court that way, I think all this stuff about like, oh, well, they feel like they have a duty to do this, or the law is so clear on that. That then explains all of, as you said, the stuff which they made choices, right? Which were discretionary. All of those discretionary choices then come into focus and make total sense, right? So why did they deny the expedited hearing? It's because they're all along, they wanted to push this as far out as possible. And so you got Donald Trump out there, the guy who half of his own cabinet says is a danger to American democracy. And, Mitch McConnell is just, I'm going to retire as a sad turtle. And he's going to hop on Trump and endorse Trump, even though he thinks that the guy is dangerous. And even though he thinks that the single most important issue facing America right now is the war in Ukraine, and that Trump is wrong on it and Biden is right on it. And this is, we are back in the guardrails and institutions will somehow hold us and don't worry about it. And the guardrails and institutions, as we found out last time, are just people, right? It takes a Brad Raffensperger to actually say, I'll take the hit and uphold this thing. It takes a Mike Pence. And I just don't get the sense that we have a whole lot of those guys left.
Well, and especially just to elaborate on your point a little bit, I mean, especially if those guys, if the equivalent to them this time, are more concerned with the credibility of their institutions than actually preventing this terrible outcome. And in a sense, Pence had no choice, right? He had to decide on January 6th, Raffensperger too, and I don't take anything away from them in saying that. But here, these people can avoid, in a sense, manning up and doing the right thing by just by not doing the wrong thing explicitly. They're not, deciding that Trump has blanket immunity, he can shoot people. They're not deciding, Mitch McConnell's fighting hard for Ukraine, but nonetheless, they can avoid really doing the serious stuff. And I guess the broader point, and this is what you've touched on, I think, many times, and correctly, very important, when an authoritarian political movement that knows what it wants intersects with institutions and guardians of institutions who are not necessarily pro-authoritarian, they just want to kind of keep the institutions going, you know, the authoritarian movement often wins, right? I mean, they are maneuvering the whole system to their own ends, and the other people aren't fighting back exactly. They're just kind of maneuvering for what? It's a little hard to even say. I mean, it sort of be like the Republican senators. We're not going to vote to impeach because the other institutions are going to take care of to convict because the other institutions are going to take care of it. And then the other institutions start to take care of it, and criminal trials and so forth. And well, no, that other people in the Supreme Court decides it's awfully dicey to do that in an election year. And
well, this guardrail,
I still got to support Trump.
Yeah,
I mean, it's like
no. This is think back to right. So we are in January of 2021, and the Senate has a chance to end the Trump's authoritarian attempt once and for all. And Mitch McConnell decides not to do it because, frankly, he just doesn't want to take the head. And he says, well, this guardrail, the impeachment, which is in the Constitution, this guardrail isn't good. We'll use the next guardrail of the criminal justice system. And they get to the criminal justice system, and everybody sets their hair on fire and says, how dare you weaponize the Department of Justice? And, you should use some other, it should be the election and the ballot box. And then we'll get to the election, and if God help us, if Trump loses, then they will begin litigating. Well, we've gotta fight through all of the court cases about this. There is no. He whines and he whines and he whines until he wins, and this has been his MO his entire life. And he was, it's a very deep insight.
I mean, and it's. Biden's Justice Department and Merrick Garland, who I respect and all that, basically he appointed Jack Smith only after Trump announced his candidacy. So it was in November of 2022. They did a little investigating before then. They mostly just ended up, luckily, the January 6th committee, which is the one place that was not passive, right?
Yeah.
I mean, Liz Cheney and Nancy Pelosi, to their great credit, decided we are going to do this. And we don't care if the Republicans scream that it's, a bias, that we don't care this and that. We're going to do it seriously. We're also going to do it with good PR, good production value, so to speak. And they did, and they probably forced actually Garland to appoint Smith, who then, to his credit, I think, really went as fast as he could. But that was already 2023. These are events that happened in January 6, 2021. There was no great mystery about what Trump did or what happened. And then the committee did its thing through late 21 and all of 22. And then we got so you're right. There's an awful lot of passing the buck and hoping someone else steps up. And some people did step up. And what's most distressing is, in a way, if their efforts proved to have been in vain. I mean, could Cheney and her colleagues have done more to lay the table for this,
no.
in Congress?
Right, they couldn't have done any more. And so let me ask you one question, though. Because I am at heart an institutionalist. What if John Roberts is right? What if the popular legitimacy of the Supreme Court is something so precious that it must be husbanded, and it is important to the body politic that we not have the Supreme Court distrusted by, completely by the entire Republican Party? Because then if Trump is president and the Supreme Court can still rule against him, and maybe Trump will have to comply with their ruling or something. My initial instinct against this argument is that it's preposterous. But I think it's worth considering. Do you have thoughts?
And I think one could hold it in good faith. I think it was easier to hold that argument in good faith in 2016, and many people did. And to be fair, many people went into the Trump administration and they lost many court cases, and so lots of guardrails, you could say, held somewhat in the first term, decreasingly so, certainly in terms of the administration itself. Congress capitulated more than it might have, and so. But then there's the 2020 election, Then there's November 3rd to January 6th. After that, to let the guy who did that and leads that that movement, and is now saying all the time that this is the point of this movement, is in effect to complete the work of January 6th. Seems a little wishful to think that, but they're just going to be Trump and his supporters if we rule against them on some very important thing that they're doing on, I don't know, firing zillions of civil servants or whatever, right? Using the military, the Insurrection Act, Well, so here's the thought experiment. Trump invokes the Insurrection Act on January 20th, 2025 for various reasons. And, it's a very vague law, actually. It's litigated, presumably, and stuff. I don't know. Do we think the Roberts, we were husbanding our credibility for this moment, but now we're going to step in and say, no way. This is not what we do in America. Use the military to resolve this.
No, they'll have to husband their credibility for the next thing that's just over the horizon, right? Because what if he does something really bad? This is just an insurrection act and it'll all be fine, right? I mean, that's where this goes.
I think so.
That's obviously where this goes. All right. Before we get out of here, I just have to say, this is a case where people like us, the people who have seen this as an ongoing authoritarian attempt, like the sort of, I think you and I are of the Anne Applebaum worldview on this.
Yeah.
There has been a fantasy among people who weren't all the way in on our worldview, who thought that something else would take care of it, right? Maybe he won't run again. Or, well, if he runs, he'll be damaged goods and somebody else will beat him. Or, well, if he runs and he wins, he'll wind up in jail or something like this. Who just thought that something else is going to save us. The truth is, this is a democracy. And in a democracy, the only thing that's going to save us from this authoritarian attempt is the voters. That's it. That's nothing else was ever going to make this go away for us. And so if the American public decides that this is what they want, and they've got their eyes wide open, right? I mean, nobody is going to go to the polls thinking, well, I don't know, maybe it won't be so bad. Maybe he'll grow in office. Like, this is, they've seen it. They've seen this movie. And if they choose that, then that's what this country deserves.
Yes. So my only slight modification would be, and you and I have discussed this before, is that the leaders of the voters, the elected officials and others, the prominent commentators, could do more to help those voters who are on the fence understand the consequences and implications of it. And that's where the Mitch McConnell, who allegedly hates Trump, hasn't spoken to him in 3 years, has been insulted very bad, his wife really in disgusting ways by Trump. If he says, okay, I still think it's better to have Trump. If you're Joe Schmo swing voter out there who doesn't like the Biden administration and the Democrats for 18 different reasons, you think, what? Mitch McConnell, he doesn't like Trump. He's not in the bag. He's not like Matt Gaetz or something. He's not a lunatic, and he's not, he's retiring as leader. He doesn't have any even incentive almost to suck up to Trump. So if he says it's okay to vote for Trump, I guess I will. So that's my slight excuse for the voters, that they're compared to the elected officials who really do know better, know really, really well. They've seen them up close, and are still so many of them going along.
Yeah. Well, and you know what? A lot of them, like Mitch McConnell, they go along because they too think that somebody else is going to take care of the mess for them, right? They're hoping that the Never Trumpers and the Democrats, the Independents, will save them so they themselves don't have to put any skin in the game. It's great. All right. Well, Bill, I'm sure you don't watch the show I do with AB, but my sign off for that is perfectly appropriate for tonight. Good luck, America.
Well, good luck, America. Sincerely, but also in a more darker way.
Thanks, Bill. Anybody listening, go over to the Bulwark, hop on our list for newsletters. We give away almost everything we do for free. You can get my look into the future, where I help you see around corners. That one you most of the time have to pay for, but sometimes it goes out free. So go over and sign up for Bulwark Plus. Barry, we're all done here, buddy. Peace out.